Hello everybody, here's another original song of mine.
On March 30th, 1981, President Ronald Reagan was leaving a speaking engagement just outside the Washington Hilton Hotel. He had only been president for 2 months, and at the age of 70, he was the oldest person to ever be elected to the office. Waving to the press, no one had expected what was about to occur. 24-year-old John Hinckley Jr., the son of a wealthy family from Dallas, Texas, took out a gun and fired a .22 long rifle bullet that ricocheted off the presidential limousine and hit Reagan in the left underarm. Reagan was rushed to the hospital, in which it was found that the bullet had broken a rib and punctured his lung, causing severe internal bleeding. The bullet made its way through his body and came a mere inch away from his heart. He was close to death upon arrival to the hospital, but doctors were able to stabilize him and nurse him back to health. As for the perpetrator, John Hinckley Jr., his motive for shooting Reagan was bizarre. In 1975, 2 years after graduating high school, Hinckley traveled to Los Angeles in an attempt to become a successful songwriter. However, after multiple blunders in the West Coast, he wrote to his parents in a plea for money, eventually moving back home with his parents in the late 70s and early 80s. John Hinckley was crushed over a failed dream. In 1978, the film Taxi Driver was released, a movie about a mentally disturbed loner growing an increasing disdain for a crime-filled and decaying New York City. By the end of the film, the main character, Travis Bickle, attempts to assassinate a US senator who is running for president. Interestingly enough, Bickle was based off of the real Arthur Bremer, who in 1972 attempted to assassinate presidential candidate George Wallace, leaving Wallace permanently paralyzed from the waist down. Bremer kept a diary in which he planned to assassinate either President Richard Nixon or Governor Wallace. Bremer got as far as even bringing a revolver to a Richard Nixon event, but could not find the opportunity in shooting Nixon as security was tight. Bremer declared in his diary that it was his destiny to assassinate George Wallace, although in his writings he never expressed as much enthusiasm towards Wallace as he did for killing Nixon. John Hinckley Jr. became enamored with the story and found himself within the Bickle character, even going as far as to watch Taxi Driver at least 15 times when it came out. The protagonist of the story seeks to rescue a young girl who does not wish to be saved. The young girl was played by actress Jodie Foster, who was 13 years old at the time of the film's release. As with everything else surrounding Taxi Driver, Hinckley fell into a deep obsession with Foster. Hinckley, then 25 years old, was seeking fame to impress the actress. From the period of 1976 to 1981, Hinckley stalked Foster's whereabouts throughout the country, even enrolling in 1980 into a writing course at Yale University after discovering Foster had become a student there. Hinckley kept writing numerous letters to Foster, but she had made it clear that she was not interested in him. Hinckley then believed that in order to become an equal to Foster, he needed to become a national figure, and a national figure quickly.
Well, the time has come. You've seen the map, we've looked at the figures, and NBC News now makes its projection for the presidency. Reagan is our projected winner.
On November 4th, 1980, Ronald Reagan was elected president in a landslide over incumbent Jimmy Carter, originally trailing President Carter all over the country, having been arrested at one point due to a firearms charge. Hinckley set his sights on the newly elected Ronald Reagan. Before the attempt on Reagan's life, Hinckley wrote this to Foster.
Over the past 7 months, I've left you dozens of poems, letters, and love messages in the faint hope that you could develop an interest in me. Although we talked on the phone a couple times, I never had the nerve to simply approach you and introduce myself. The reason I'm going ahead with this attempt now is because I cannot wait any longer to impress you.
On the afternoon of March 30th, 1981, Hinckley fired at President Reagan and in the crossfire wounded police officer Thomas Dillahantley and Secret Service agent Timothy McCarthy. Not only that, but Hinckley critically wounded Press Secretary James Brady. Hinckley was then immediately pinned down to the ground. James Brady was shot in the right side of his head, which left him paralyzed on the left side of his body for the rest of his life. On August 4th, 2014, Brady's eventual death due to the shooting was labeled a homicide. In 1982, the Hinckley trial took place, in which it was discovered that Hinckley was striving to reenact the event of Taxi Driver and fit it in the mold of his life. His pathological obsession with the movie was enough for attorneys to argue that Hinckley was ill with narcissistic personality disorder, the disorder being defined as an inflated sense of self-importance and caused by genetic and environmental factors. Hinckley saw Travis Bickle and wanted to literally be him. The 1982 verdict determined that Hinckley was not guilty by reason of insanity. The verdict was met with much public criticism, with some from the public seeing the verdict as going too soft. Keep in mind that it had only been a mere 17 years since the last successful presidential assassination. John F. Kennedy had been killed by Lee Harvey Oswald. Oswald denied his involvement in the assassination, declaring that he was just simply a patsy. Oswald was shot by a local nightclub owner on live TV. If Oswald had survived, there's no telling what more information would have come out. The general public wanted justice for Kennedy's assassination, so when it came to Reagan's near-fatal altercation with Hinckley, the verdict was met with general disagreement. So much so that following the verdict, Congress and a number of states rewrote laws that redefined using the insanity defense, with 3 states abolishing the use of the insanity defense altogether. Ronald Reagan would later declare that he had no ill will towards Hinckley.
Were you angry?
Well, I didn't know for quite a while until they began to tell me about the young man that had done this and what his problem was, that he was not exactly on a normal basis. And so then I added him to my prayers, that prayers for myself, that, well, if I wanted healing for myself, maybe he should have some healing for himself.
The Pope forgave the man who shot him. You forgive John Hinckley?
Yes, I found out he wasn't thinking on all
Levels.
on all cylinders. Yeah.
Interestingly enough, around a week before Reagan was shot, he was at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., where Abraham Lincoln had been shot a century before. Reagan had looked at the box above the stage where Lincoln had met a bullet, and felt a curious sensation that even with all the Secret Service protection he had, it was probably still possible for someone who had enough determination to get close enough to the president and shoot them. Unlike Lincoln's murder, the reason behind this one involved infatuation. Jodie Foster has only commented on the event 3 times. Once during a press conference only a couple days after the attack, in an article discussing Hinckley's sentencing, and during an interview in 1999. Understandably, she tends to end or cancel any interviews that mention Hinckley. As for John Hinckley, following the trial, he wrote this about the shooting.
The greatest love offering in the history of the world.
Hinckley was transported to St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Washington, D.C., determined by the psychiatric hospital to be unpredictably dangerous. 5 years following the shooting, he was discovered to still be obsessing over Jodie Foster, with various photographs and letters attributed to her. In the 1980s, Hinckley found himself to be enamored by other serial perpetrators, even managing to send letters to Ted Bundy and seeking the address of Charles Manson. As the new millennium crept by, Hinckley was allowed to have supervised visits with his parents and was beginning to slowly rehabilitate himself into normal life. By March of 2011, a forensic psychologist determined that Hinckley had recovered to a point that he posed no more imminent risk of danger to himself or others, but judges were still reluctant to release him. However, on July 27, 2016, a federal judge ruled that Hinckley could be released from the hospital, with many prohibitions attached, including not contacting Reagan's family or the Jodie Foster family. Ever since the attempt, Hinckley has been depicted in the media as a sad and lonely man. In the musical Assassins, which depicts historical figures who have attempted to kill US presidents, he sings a duet with Lynette Frum, who attempted to kill Gerald Ford in an effort to impress Charles Manson, in a song titled Unworthy of Your Love.
Nothing, you are wind and water and sky. Jodie, tell me, Jodie, how I can earn your love.
Hinckley is seen playing his guitar, to which remains true to what he does today. As a young man, Hinckley had failed to make a name for himself as a musician. In October of 2020, he was allowed by a federal court to market his songs and writings under his name, creating a YouTube channel by December of 2020. As of July 2021, John Hinckley has amassed over 18,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel, and chooses to look past the assassination attempt. It's now been 40 years since the incident. Ronald Reagan completed his presidency in 1989 and died in 2004, leaving behind a complicated legacy, while Jodie Foster has continued to act and has even transitioned into directing her own work. It appears that Hinckley has chosen to try and engage back to normal society. In fact, in June of 2021, he said that he was working on an album, and was looking for a record label to help him release it.
Hello everybody, this is another original song of mine. Freedom stands next to me. Everybody knows my history.
It's hard to say what's going on in his mind to this day, and whether or not he should be forgiven for his past obsessive behaviors. That's really up to the viewer to dictate whether or not he should be reassessed. However, when it comes to comments on his YouTube channel, they tend to be positive. This was the globe of a century, from trying to assassinate a president and now making love songs. This is so catchy. Seriously loving it, John. Lamau, you tried to assassinate the president and now you're making love songs. Honestly, that's a glow up. We all make mistakes. Yours was truly a really big one, but you got through it, so you and everyone deserves a second chance. Everyone deserves a new life after accepted punishment. Nice song. Honestly, I myself am unsure whether or not John should be forgiven. Hopefully, you'll help me make up my mind in the comments below. But I know one thing for a fact. His song, I Sing My Songs, is actually pretty good. I've been Zeepstered, and I'll see you later.
May my words be loud and clear. May my words be loud and clear. Thank you.